Yeah. All right.
Anita, could you please stop the share for now? Let us have the introduction session.
Okay, we can do one thing. Hashik is not picking up my call, but it is.
Yes, he has joined, Dada. He has joined. He's
Okay.
there.
He's there, right?
Yes, sir. Should I start with the introduction?
Yeah, please.
A very warm welcome to all our panelists, attendees, and coordinators for this session. The title of this session is Sounds of South Asia, Exploring Ethnomusicology. The chair of this session is Dr. Hashik. He is an assistant professor in the Department of Cultural Studies, Tezpur University, Assam. His broad area of interest are performance studies, community studies, and identity politics in Northeast India. Now I would like to introduce all our panelists. Our first panelist is Dr. Hanif Miah. He holds the position of an associate professor in the Department of Sociology at the University of Chittagong, if I'm not mistaken.
Chittagong.
Chittagong, Bangladesh. His doctoral research focused on the examination of gender relations in the bold culture of Bangladesh, particularly from a feminist perspective. His research delved into the gender dynamics and specialization of women in folk culture, and he pursued his doctoral studies at Central China Normal University in China. In addition to his academic pursuits, Dr. Hanif is actively involved as both a researcher and a folk artist. We welcome you, sir. Secondly, I would like to introduce Mukesh, sir. Mukesh Kulriya entered the Ph.D. program in ethnomusicology in fall of 2018, having previously received an MPhil in theatre and performance studies and a master's degree in arts and aesthetics from both from JNU, Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. Sir's research focuses on the intersection of music and religion in South Asia in the context of gender and caste. His PhD research project examines bhakti or devotion in women's folk songs of Rajasthan, India, with a particular interest in the communitarian spirit of the bhakti and Sufi movements as a challenge to the dominant Brahmanical patriarchal order in South Asia and a movement towards the creation of an egalitarian society. His MPhil dissertation, titled Jama Mela and Parja, Cultural Enactments of Ramdev or Ramsa Peer, focused on Ramdev, a 14th century northern Indian saint. Since 2010, Mukesh sir has elaborated on India-based projects centered around craft, culture, folk music, and oral traditions as an organizer, archivist, translator, and researcher. We welcome you, sir. Do we have Pramantha sir here? We don't? All right. So that I would hand over the mic to the chair. We may begin the session. Thank you.
So you're muted.
Dr. Hashik, sir, you can start with the session.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you so much.
Yeah. So, dear all, I would like to extend a warm welcome to all our esteemed panelists here gathered here today. And it's truly an honor to have such a distinguished group of individuals, participants, and all. And we all are eager to hear your presentations and engage in a fruitful discourses and discussions. And without much delay, I would like to invite Dr. Hanif Miah, sir, Associate Professor, Department of Sociology, University of Chittagong, Bangladesh. So kindly, I request sir to start his presentation, sir. Please.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Hashik, chair of this session. First of all, I would like to thank CFSR for inviting me in this panel discussion on Sounds of South Asia, exploring ethnomusicology. So under this heading, I want to talk about the soundscape of Bangladesh, upstream to downstream. So if you allow me to share the screen, I want to share my PPT presentation here. Is it showing on the screen?
Yes, perfectly
Yes.
fine.
Okay. So how we can operate this? Yes. Okay. Yeah. Sure. So okay. Where is it? First, I would like to talk about the landscape of Bangladesh, soundscape of Bangladesh, particularly from upstream to downstream. Today, we gather here to explore the rich soundscape of Bangladesh, a country where the flow of rivers dictates not only the landscape, but also the rhythm of life and music. From upstream to downstream, each region of Bangladesh has its own unique musical tradition, reflecting the diverse culture, landscape, and lifestyle of its people. Before that, I want to uh, give a sum up about the folk music or folk songs of Bangladesh. Bangladesh is rich in cultural diversity. You know, the regional folk songs reflect the traditions, language, lifestyle. Here is the sum of important folk songs in Bangladesh, particularly the Baul Gan, Majbandari Gan, Bhateli Gan, Bhawaiya Gan, Dhamail, Gazir Gan, Gombhira, Hasan Raja's song, Jari Gan, Jatrapala, Kobi Gan, Kirtan, Lalon's song, Palagan, Sharigan, and Shama Sangit. Here, Gan means the song. Uh, Let us embark on a journey from the upstream region characterized by the rivers Brahmaputra, that means Jamuna, Gangas, Padma, down to the southern deltaic plains where the Padma, Meghna, and Jamuna rivers covers. Starting with the upstream region of Rangpur and Rajshahi division, we encounter a vibrant tapestry of folk music deeply rooted in the agrarian lifestyle and cultural heritage of the people. Particularly in Rangpur division, Bhaya songs region supreme, weaving tales of love, separation, and nostalgia amidst the vast floodplains and riverine islands. The swift tempo changes and improvised lyrics of Bhaya music captured the essence of rural life with unparalleled energy and favor. So the Bhavaya, Bihu, Baul, and Palagan is commonly singing and characteristics of the lifestyle of Rangpur region. Moving to the Rajshahi division, we find ourselves immersed in the spiritual and philosophical realm of Baul music. The music minstrel known as Baul sing a love, devotion, and the eternal quest for spiritual enlightenment. Resonating deeply with the listener's soul, Bhaya song, Kirtan, and Bhateli song further enrich the musical landscape of this region, celebrating the beauty of nature, the changing season, and the rice cultural heritage of Bengal. So this is the uh, regional distribution of folk songs in the upstream region, particularly in Rangpur division and Rajshahi division. And then transitioning to the central region of Dhaka and Mymensingh, we encounter a fusion of tradition and contemporary influences, reflecting the cultural melting pot that is the capital region. Baul songs, with their music and philosophical themes, find resonance alongside traditional forms like Bhatiali, Jari, and Palagan songs. In Moymanshing division, the tranquil melodies of Bhatiali's song resonate with the realms of the Brahmaputra and the Meghna, painting a vivid picture of riverine life and natural beauty of the region. So in particular, Baul Bhatiali Jari Bhawaya Palagan, commonly seen in Dhaka division, Greater Dhaka division, and particularly in Mymensingh division, Bhatiali, Baul Jari and Palagan, respectively. Finally, we journeyed downstream to the southern region of Borishal, Khulna, and Chittagong. We are greeted by the diverse sounds of folk music deeply rooted in the dialectic plains and mangrove forest. Baul song and Bhawaya song continue to enchant us with their timeless melodies and profound lyrics, while Marfoti song and Bisidi song add a touch of festive cheer and emotion depth to the musical landscape. In Chittagong division, we are introduced to the indigenous communities of Bangladesh, each with its own unique folk music, uh, traditions reflecting their cultural identity, spiritual belief, and close connection with nature. Uh, this is the downstream regional distribution of folk songs in Bangladesh, particularly in Borishal division, Baul, Bhawaiya, Marfuti, Bichedi in Khulna division, Bhawaiya, Bhateli, Baul, Jari Mushili, Chittagong division, Mazbandari, Chakma, Marma Tripura, Baul, and local song. So it's very important to share that Baul song is very common in nature in every place. From upstream to downstream. Here, I would like to introduce some specific folk song and its history, I mean, the collection or composition and the regionality, which
Dr. Hanif, I'm
territory
really sorry
belongs.
to interrupt you. Actually, the PPT is not visible. The
Oh,
participants have pointed out that the PPT is not
oh,
visible.
is not available. Okay.
No, sir.
Oh, it stopped. I'm so sorry. Okay. So, uh, now is it on the screen? Yes.
It is visible now, sir.
Okay. Okay. In fact, I was talking about the diverse types of folk songs, and also I have talked about the regional distribution of folk songs from upstream to downstream. Where is the PPT of my lecture? And finally, I am going to introduce some particular folk songs and their composition and regionality. Composition means the compositor and the origin of these folk traditions. Regionality means where I would like to uh, mm, distribute this folk song in a particular region. Just think about the Baul Gan. Baul Gan is a famous musical trends in Bangladesh as well as the part of uh, West Bengal in India. Commonly, the composer of Baul song is famously known the name of Fakir Lalon Shai uh, from Kustia, and definitely the another renowned person, Shah Abdul Karim from Sunamganj under Silet division, Radharaman Datto, also the composer of Baul song from Mymensingh, Pagla Kanai from Jinaida, Arif Dewan from Dhaka, Jalaluddin Khan from Netrikona, Baba Pagla from Dhamrai, Dhaka, Rashid Sarkar, Singer from Manikganj. So behind this lyricist, the Shaujia Bauls and subsect Baul tradition, there are many more composer and singer. Also, you can say is a lyricist. Regionality from the regional distribution, baul song is uh, popularly sing by the people of all the region of Bangladesh, in every region of upstream to downstream. This is the Mazbandari Gan, Mazbandari song. Another important baul, sophistic baul song in Bangladesh, particularly introduced by the Mazbandari in Chittagong, the downstream region of Bangladesh is Chittagong. Mazbandari Gan is a devotional music, and it's saying that by the Syed Ahmadullah, 1826 to 1906, start these kinds of traditions in Photixuri. And Ramesh Shil of Chittagong is the most famous composer of Mazbandari song. Also Abdul Hadi, Abdul Ghani, Bazlul Karim, Abdullah and Mahabullah Alam, also the composer of Mazbandari song. Particularly this song is the regional song of Chittagong, but presently it is spreading out all over the Bangladesh by different medias, audio cassette and electronics medias. Bhati Eligan, this is the song of river communities, music of fishermen and boatmen. And this song usually seen in the Mymensingh district along with the Brahmaputra river or the Bhati, lower region of river area of Bangladesh as its place of origin. And notably, it is collected or sometimes composed by Miraz Ali, Ukil Munshi, Rashiduddin, Jalal Khan, Jang Bahadur, Shah Abdul Karim, Omid Ali, in between the 1930s to 1950s. So similarly, we hear the Bhawaiya Gan. Bhawaiya is a musical form of popular folk music in the northern part of Bangladesh, particularly in Rangpur and Rajshahi district. Okay. My laptop is working very slowly. I'm pushing the button, but it's not. Okay, we got to the Bhawaiya Gan song. Okay, it's the song of working class as well. It's a Mahut, it's a Mahishals, buffalo herders, and gharials, cart drivers. Here is some Oki Gharial Bhai. So these kinds of song is Bhawaiya Gan. And Abbasuddin and Kusimuddin are both are known as a primary and famous Bhaya lyricist. The another form of folk songs in Bangladesh is Dhamail, a form of folk music and dance originated in Sylhet and Mymensingh region. It is practiced in the Sylhet and Mymensingh division in Bangladesh and in areas influenced by the culture of Sylhet, such as the Barak Valley of Assam and part of Tripura, Mymensingh and Manipur in India. The folk music composes Radharaman Datta. I mean, Dhamail song, most of the Dhamail song is composed by Radharaman Datta and Akram Shah have been cited as having introduced the Dhamail dance tradition to the Sylhet region. Gomvira. Gomvira is the famous folk songs in Chapai Nawabganj and Malda, performed with a particular distinctive rhythm. The tradition is also popular in the nearby district of Rajshahi and Nauga, that is Gomvira. The another important folk song is Gazir Gan, a devotional song dedicated to Gazi Pir, who is part of past Pir tradition of folk practice and beliefs. So, past Pir is the Jinda Pir, Badar Pir, Madar Pir, Satta Pir, and there is a symbolic mazar, a shrine in many part of Bangladesh. So more than 70 years ago, Joshimuddin collected the Gazir gun from a farmer living in the remote area of Faridpur. As well as these kinds of Gazir gun also seen in or popular in Noakhali, Chittagong and Sylhet district. As well as Dhamrai and Manikganj, where I don't mention this name, but my experience in my childhood, I have heard this song overnight. It's very interesting. And there is some story about Hemmes Kemmes, Gole Bakuli Pushpo, something like that. So another important folk song is Hasan Raja's song. Everyone knows this name, Hasan Raja. Baula ke banailo re, Hasan Raja re, Baula ke banailo. These kinds of song, I mean, who make me baul? That is the question asked by Hasan Raja. And it's a kind of baul song. And also this song is popular in Sylhet, northern side of Bangladesh, near Assam as well. This song, I mean, the song composed by Hasan Raja is deeply rooted in Sufi mysticism, reflecting themes of love, spirituality, and the human condition. Another important song is Jarigan. Jarigan, Bangla song, originating in the elegiac lectures of Muharram. I mean, it's a Marsiya song. During this Muharram, people sing this song in a group, and they are expressing the scenery or event of Karbala, Hasin Hussein, Hai Hassan. So probably it's also seen in some part of West Bengal. Jarigan composer and singer includes Abdul Malik Dawan, Abdul Khalik Dawan, Abdul Ghani Bayati, Shayali Bayati, Abbas Ali, Bhashan, Muhammad Ali Akbar, Mian, etc. So these kinds of song usually seen in the Greater Dhaka division, particularly in Manikganj, and this is also famous in Old Dhaka, as well as these kinds of song also seen in Moymenshing area. Another important folk song, Jatrapala, actually it is now demolished. We have lost this tradition, but sometimes seen in the different occasion that performed by some peoples on stage. Usually these kinds of song or performance involves a colorful presentation of historical themes. However, in rural areas, hundreds of spectators still enjoy the Jatra performance with keen interest in the wide field of or open fields in semi-darkness. The Jatra is very popular in Greater Bangladesh region of Jashore, Khulna, Faridpur, Borishal, Rajshahi, Dinajpur, Mymensingh, and Sylhet. So Kirtan is a devotional song depicting love to Hindu god Krishna and his best known lover Radha. So Kirtan is common in every Shahujiya, Vaishnav, or some Bauls who come from the Hindu community. So as well as some Kirtan or music also composed by Fakir Lalan Shah. So Kirtan also popular in both Hindu and Muslim community. Those are open-minded and not the follower of fundamental religion. So usually the qualities of these deities and their deeds are described in Kirtan. There are two types of Kirtan, Nam Kirtan and Lila Kirtan. Kirtan is popular in rural areas of Bangladesh, particularly in Hindu Vaishnava community. Lalan song, everyone know about this prominent famous figure. Lalan is equally popular in Bangladesh and West Bengal. as far I know. So Lalon song is also known as the Lalon Giti or Lalon song. It is documented that there are more than 1,000 songs related to Islamic Sufism, Hindu, Vaishnavism, and Buddhist Shahziya by Fakir Lalon Shah. Lalon song is popular uh, all over the world, particularly in Bangladesh and West Bengal. The another song is where is it? Shama Sangit, a genre of Bengali devotional song dedicated to Hindu goddess Shama or Kali. The Jarigan. Sorry, I have already told about the Jarigan. My laptop is not okay. The Palagan. Yeah, it's a narrative folk ballad. It's also known as Moymansingh ballad and Purbo ballad. I mean Moymansingh Gitika and Purbo Gitika. So this musical narrative about gods and religious hymns are also known as a Palagan. So here is the details about, not details, it's a precise form of its characteristics, its regionality, and the composer. Palagan originated in Moymansingh, with many of the ballads being based on real events. A few of the composers whose names are
Excuse me,
known
sir.
as a
When you
Mansur Boyati.
excuse
Yes,
me, Hanif, uh,
I'm ending very soon. A few composers, his name is Mansur Boyati, Dewana Modina, Fakir Faizu, Surat Jamal, and Adha Sundari. So those are the ballad related the God and religious narrative about the past or history. Sharigan. Okay, this is the last one I'm talking about. Sharigan is a kind of folk song sung specially by boatmen. It's often known as a workman's song. One of the famous song composed by the Shah Abdul Karim. It's a Sharigan. কোন মিস্ত্রি নাও বানাইলো কেমন দেখা যায় ঝিলমিলি ঝিলমিলি করে রে ময়ূর পঙ্খী নাই I mean, who create the boat and who are the driver of this boat. So it's a devotional songs related to the inner meaning of life and our existence. So Sharigan also composed by Shah Abdul Karim, and particularly these kinds of song usually seen in Dhaka, Silet, Mymensingh, Faridpur, Pabna, Rajshahi, Rangpur, Dinajpur, and Jashore region. So in finally, I would like to conclude my lecture here that the soundscape of Bangladesh is a testament to the rich cultural heritage and musical diversity of the country. From the tranquil melodies of Bhatiali songs echoing along the river and the soul-stirring verses of Baul music resonating the heart of listener, each region of Bangladesh contributes its own unique rhythms and melodies to the tapestry of Bengali folk music. Thank you so much for listening me, and I'm feeling honored for delivering this speech about the soundscape of Bangladesh from upstream to downstream. So that's all. Thank you so much.
that's a wonderful presentation. I think we can take end of all these conditions in representation. So, Mokesh, Hello? Hello? Hello?
Oh,
Sir, your voice is breaking. Your voice is breaking. We are unable to hear you.
my voice?
No, 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 not you, sir. I'm talking
Oh,
about the chair.
Mrittika,
okay, yes.
can you hear me?
Yeah, right now it is audible, but before it was breaking.
Okay. So thank you so much for your wonderful presentations, sir. We all at the end of the session. Presentation. Mukesh Raul, I request Mukesh to start his presentation.
Okay. Shall I start?
Sure, sure.
Yeah.
Okay, before starting by the Mukesh Kulriya, sorry to say that I need to leave because I have another important task. If you permit me, I'm getting permission from the chair. Please allow me to leave this session for the moment. I'll join later.
Thank you, sir, for your wonderful presentation. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.
And one
Okay.
request,
Thanks.
Mrittika has another person. Pramantha has joined our session.
Yes, I have. I'm facing some problems with connectivity, but I'm here.
Okay. After Mukesh, you can. We will move to you for the presentation.
Sure.
Okay. Okay. So please, Mukesh. Please.
Can you specify how much time I have?
Can take turn.
I think I'm not been okay. Just give me a heads up a couple of minutes before. I'll just try to wind it up.
Sure,
Okay.
sure, Mukesh.
I think I have shared a link with the team. If they can play the link in a couple of minutes, that would be great. Yeah. So let me start by saying that, thank you to the organizer for bringing me on board. It's such a wonderful conference. And though the panel is on ethnomusicology, I got tempted because it's broadly the conference is about folklore and folk. So that's my primary interest. So I'm going to speak about my previous research, which is based on my MPhil research, which is on the figure of Ramdev. It's a 14th century saint figure. So in the previous presentation, we were going upstream and downstream in the river, but now I bring you back to the totally opposite side of the desert of Thar. So there are no upstream and downstream, but a lot of just desert stones. So bear with it. Before I start, especially in folklore, ethnomusicology, or anthropology, the reason is something very, very specific. Like, everyone, broadly, it's the attempt, it is expected from you as a researcher that you establish the uniqueness of your region, right? That's how you make it sound like it's that it's a new research and this has to be explored. As much as I understand that each region has its own specificity in terms of food, culture, and everything, I think I personally feel that the idea of scholarly work, when especially we're working in this very cross-cultural and global setup, it's important to work on similarities because a lot of time the forms or the manifestation of those cultural practices might look like very, very different and new and very specific local. But if we go a little bit of underneath, there are these broader phenomena that are working, right? So let's say if we talk about faith, somewhere it takes the form of songs, poetry, sometimes it takes a form of temple worship or prayer and all. So that's my basic premise that I'm going to kind of work on that. Of course this research that I did on Ramdev, it is very specific, but a little bit broadly, if you look at it, has a long broader connection. Let's say Baul tradition in Bengal to, let's say, Sufi tradition of, let's say, Sindh or Punjab, that sometime there is a one figure who we call them guru, saint, poet, and a lot of them are historical figures, right? So yeah, I think if we can play that video, I think it would give a sense to people what I'm talking about in a broader sense, and then I'm after that I'm just going to read out my paper. Yeah, is that possible?
Yes, sir. Just give us a minute.
Yeah, please take it. No rush. So while the video comes up, so this is a documentary which I commissioned as a curator when I started this oral tradition archive for Rekha Foundation. So this is basically a short trailer of that documentary that we kind of try to make. Yeah, we can start from the start and with the sound.
अरे 12 महीने बाबा का दरबार में हम आते हैं। अरे बाबा दी कृपा थी, मेरे को सब कुछ सुख शांति है।
भक्त लोग आते हैं, कई प्रकार से आते हैं, कई संघ बना के आते हैं, गाड़ियों से आते हैं, कई पैदल चल के आते हैं, कोई दंडवत करते आते हैं। भादवा में मेला लगता है। लोग तो पूरे भारतवर्ष से आते हैं, लाखों लाखों लोग आते हैं, अनेकों अनेक प्रकार से भगवत आते हैं और सबकी मनोकामना पूर्ण होती है। बाबा रामदेव जी महाराज का अवतार लजमल जी के घर हुआ। आज से करीबन 640 साल पहले यहाँ एक भैरव नाम का राक्षस था, उसका वध करने के लिए रामदेव जी का अवतार हुआ। सबसे बड़ी बात यह है कि रामदेव जी ने उस समय हर समाज को, हर वर्ग को अपने गले लगाया और अपने बराबर माना। उन्होंने हर मानव मात्र, जानवर मात्र, जंतु मात्र में भगवान का रूप माना।
बाबा रामदेव जी ने दुनिया को लाखों पर्चे दिखाए, लेकिन बाबा रामदेव जी को पर्चा देने वाली वो महान शक्ति डालीबाई थी। जो डालीबाई ने जो भविष्यवाणी की थी वो सब की सब चीजें निकल गई। डालीबाई वो महान शक्ति थी जो 15वीं शताब्दी के अंदर गौ भक्त निकली थी, और उस समय जो गायों का बीड़ा डालीबाई ने उठाया था, छोटी सी कन्या ने, वो ऐसा बीड़ा आज तक कोई महामानव नहीं उठा पाया।
लेकिन जो है ना पाकिस्तानी लोग वो ज्यादा मेहमान।
Yeah, thank you, Megal, for playing it. Yeah, so this is a subject matter of today's conversation. So as you see in the bowl tradition, in the previous presentation, we saw that singing poetry is the primary vehicle of primary mode of bowl tradition, right? So here in this particular case, it is the pilgrimage, walking to the shrine, that is the one of the most significant part of this tradition. And that walking means walking from, let's say, I think of course up to, let's say, 100, 200, 300 kilometers. So people walk that far, and on the way, when they walk, on the way there are a lot of performance or cultural enactment that happens. And one of the things that also happens on the way is this whole idea of singing. So that's a musical part, and what they sing, I'm going to talk about it in a little bit. So The saint tradition in the medieval period was a very important phenomenon across South Asian region. In Rajasthan, Ramdev is one such 14th century figure. He is said to be a Rajput prince. Rajput is basically a ruling class or upper caste in northwest of India. And he was also called Avatar of Lord Krishna on one hand, and an Ismaili missionary of Khoja tradition, and also a son of a Dalit on the other. So here what we are dealing, the Ramdev's identity, there are the three aspects. One, he was born in a Rajput family, royal family. Second, he was also a messenger or missionary of the Khoja or Ismaili tradition. And third, he was born into a Dalit family. So this contestation is very central to Ramdev's identity and popularity. During his lifetime, he is said to have performed miracles, and his teachings have a strong anti-caste assertion and egalitarian spirit. He is very popular among the lower caste and Muslims, but was detested by upper caste until recently. In the 20th century, the popularity of Ramdev grew exponentially, and it gets reflected in the performance tradition and ritual associated with it. Just for a sense of number, I think the annual pilgrimage, which happens around August and September in the shrine in Ramdevra, which is located near Pokhran. Pokhran, if I think many of you might know, Pokhran is a site of nuclear testing in India. So it's just 12 kilometers from there. So in those 10 days of annual fair, around 3 to 4 million people visits. So that's the scale we are dealing with here. MMN and others in a book on congregation say that congregation act as and carriers of some larger tradition. He talks about myths as something bigger than history. They speak of divine action in ways that define who we are. When members talk about the congregation's founding or its survival of a crisis in terms of God and God's unfolding will, they are giving up the story mythic quality. It is not less true for being a myth, but more so. So the idea of congregation, which is very central to a lot of bhakti devotional tradition, whether it's Baul tradition or Kabir tradition, or let's say here Ramdev. So breaking the barrier of caste, class, and in some cases gender, which is very central to bhakti tradition. So when we say Ramdev, when people walk on the pilgrimage, the regular social order of a caste society gets suspended for a bit. Like for those 10 days, that caste order is suspended, and no one actually, and I don't think anyone can make claim that okay, it is an anti-caste tradition, but it doesn't. We can't claim that this tradition actually you have eradicated caste in society. But what it does, it's a very small period of time, and in a certain spaces, it suspends the caste order. The permutation and combination of local and the larger make each of them unique in relevance to the community. Their life depends on their compatibility with the community in a new context. They identified three primary patterns of congregation response to substantial socio-cultural context.
Sir, we're so sorry to interrupt you, but we'd like you to conclude in 2 minutes, please.
Okay, sure.
Thank you so much. Really sorry to interrupt.
No worries. I think so. Yeah, I think I'll just have a time to just briefly wrap it up. So what we are so the Ramdev, the three important point for Ramdev is that this is a very important anti-caste phenomena in northwest of India. His popularity is in Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, Punjab, Haryana, Western UP, and is slowly spreading among my diaspora from Rajasthan. And the second, because this phenomena or tradition belong to the marginalized portion of the society, it is sung through songs. So when we say the miracles, okay, Ramdev performed miracle. How those miracle actually spread? It is spread through their songs, right? So the music again here plays a very central role, and the structure of music is very common in the region. Whether you listen to the song of Ramdev or listen to the song of other saint poet, the more or less the lyric and rhythmic structure is same, right? It is basically the reiteration of songs through different reason that these miracles get kind of spread. So, so the singing in a way become a vehicle where this phenomena of Ramdev actually spread across the region. So when it goes to Punjab, there's a little bit of Punjabi come into the context, the Gujarati come into the context. So now also, because with the spread of it, and the a lot of regions are coming together, but also over a period of time, different caste groups. So well, let's say if there are 15 caste group we are talking about, over a period of time, we have seen that there are a lot of these different miracles being performed by Ramdev belongs to this different caste group. So this is the strategy. This is the strategy that any tradition or the cult that is in under process of becoming big actually deploy. That okay, we will have a miracle performed to a tailor caste or carpenter caste or Dalit caste or backward caste. So that's how the strategy that works to bring to constantly basically broaden the social base of the tradition. Yeah, I think I don't have much time, but yeah, I think I'm happy to answer more question when there is if there is a Q&A question. Thank you.
Personal insight based on what you shared about Ramdev, because my family belongs to Rajasthan and they did migrate with a lot of stories, and like there's a frame of Ramdev and there is his life cycle in that. But as a second and third generation coming from that family, I wasn't aware about it. So there's this disconnect as well.
Okay.
So this was very interesting to hear from you. So thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. That's an interesting thing. Bhumika, we will put all the questions in the last.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mukesh. And I request Pramantha to start his presentation.
Pramantha, sir, and then we can start with this.
Okay, sure. So, could you please start, Pramantha?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well,
Pramantha Tagore's research and scholarship explore the interplay between music, race, and cultural politics in the long 19th century. A prominent emphasis of his work has been on the historical practices of music making in modern South Asia, in particular colonial Bengal, and how these practices help shape cultural identities. He is presently a Neubauer Family Foundation doctoral fellow at the Department of Music and holds simultaneous positions as honorary fellow and associate director of the Center for 19th Century Studies International, based at Durham University, and the International 19th Century Studies Association. We welcome you, sir.
thank you so much, Bhumika, for that wonderful introduction. It really is a pleasure to be speaking at the first International Young Folklorist Conference, and it was the initial idea was that I would maybe begin with introductions, but introductory comments on South Asia. But I think now it makes sense to do concluding comments on South Asia, to bring together two wonderful presentations by Dr. Hanif, Miah, and of course Mukesh. I know we don't have much time, so I wanted to talk about a couple of concepts when we think about folklore and ethnomusicology, and especially in South Asia, when we bring these various concepts together. How do we really think about folk songs? What is folk song as an object, and how does that category, in a sense, help us to deal with different kinds of music that we, hear? And I will come towards the end to talk a little bit about Bhatiyali as well, but that which has already been spoken about a little bit, but in a different context. And to begin with, whenever I have actually thought of folk songs, it's always been linked to this idea, as Mukesh says, that there is this sense of pilgrimage. There is always a sense of movement when it comes to any sort of folk song, and this movement links folk song often to ideas of borderlands. And by borderlands, I don't just mean that, spaces that are in between, spaces between two places, two effective borders, as it says. For example, we can think of the space between India and Bangladesh as, you know, no man's land, as some sort of borderlands. And certainly those are spaces where different kinds of identities get mixed, different kinds of musical production happen in those kinds of spaces. But borderlands are also spiritual. Borderlands are also in the non-material realm. We think always of movements of people over borders when we think of the great epics. All the stories of the Ramayanas and the Mahabharata has stories of movement across spaces. Folk music, in turn, should be usually seen in terms of something as crossings, often over borderlands, because just like Bhatti Ali's songs, you're moving across borders. You're moving across the way a river runs, which doesn't necessarily be linked to any specific type of border. But this idea of borderlands and non-borderlands as something which is like a little more global is connected to an earlier history, a more global history of folk song. And this comes from late German Enlightenment. There is a famous thinker called Gottfried Herder, and in the 17th and 18th centuries. And Herder in Germany had developed this idea of Volkslied, which is folk song, or you know, essentially any song related to folk cultures. And a major part of Herder's oeuvre of writing, corpus, essentially had to do with collecting folk songs. And this is the integral link between disciplines like ethnomusicology, which study the social and cultural, you know, history of music, and folklore, which is the idea of collecting. And this comes from a very a long history that ties the early development of ideas like music studies and ethnomusicology that developed in Germany in the early 1900s and the 1950s, to all the way to thinking about folk song we do today. The idea of collecting. People were interested, people were going from urban to regional places, people were traveling all the way from Europe to India and learning about regional folk and other kinds of songs. Another way of thinking deeply about folk songs is to develop this idea or of song far more broadly. And here I urge you to think of the ethnomusicologist or Ashok Ranade. Dr. Ranade used to work essentially in Bombay, and most of his work had to do with Hindustani art music traditions. But Dr. Ranade also loved talking about folk traditions in Maharashtra. Of his many categories of what constitutes folk songs, and this you can see this in his book, you know, Art Music of India. One of the key categories is that the song should not only be, at least in India, should not only be linked to lyrics, but even instrumental music that is purely built out of sounds rather than or notes rather than song lyrics, can also be seen to constitute folk song. And and of course, there are specific characteristics of those kinds of songs. Dr. Ranade had had a long list of items that he considered to be constitutive or characteristic of song, which includes sustained notes, certain types of movements of songs, and they weren't always linked to ideas of ragas, which Dr. Ranade's major research was about. But herein also a third angle comes through, which has to do with the folk music instrument. The folk music instrument especially is something that I like calling a borderland object, because these instruments tend to travel with musicians across boundaries, whether it's in Bengal, whether it's in Maharashtra, UP, you name it. these instruments tend to have often dual functions, because in one type of folk song they create a particular type of sound, but when you think of another type of folk song in a different region, then that sound and its context kind of changes. And this is linked again to traditional the histories of traditional folk narratives or even epic narratives. If you think of something which is not an instrument that's not a folk instrument at all, like a conch shell, it could be a folk instrument in some way. A conch shell could be seen in some cases to represent some sort of sacred journey, a sort of beginning of a sacred ritual. But if you see images of the Mahabharata, conch shells are usually used to signal war and the beginning of a coming of battle. Krishna is seen in the avatar of holding a conch shell, or Arjun is often seen holding a conch shell in many images from that. But one of the interesting things that we can gain out of folk instruments is to look directly at these instruments. One of the major museums of folk instruments is designed by the Eastern Zonal Cultural Center in Kolkata. And I wanted to draw these examples from essentially Bengal, which is more than, it's called the Vadya Vitika Museum of Musical Instruments. Which has more than 300 musical instruments on display with different subsections. Just like classical music instruments are usually divided according to different subsections, these as well in percussions, which are percussion, string, solid instruments, etc. And so that this idea of musical instrument and its borderland crossings also form this history of this global phenomena of folk songs. One of the major folk song collectors, perhaps unwittingly, was a gentleman called Arnold Bakke. And I don't know if many of us have access to Arnold Bakke's music recordings and collections, but if you search for Arnold Bakke, Arnold, Arnold Bakke, Bakke, especially with the hyphenated British Library, then what you will really see is a massive collection of folk songs that is collected by this gentleman, Arnold Bakke, who is originally from the Netherlands. Bakke was collecting folk songs in India in a period even before the field of ethnomusicology was developed properly in the 1950s, because his early trips to India happened in the 1920s and the 1930s, when he initially traveled all the way from the Netherlands, presumably after having heard a lecture of Rabindranath Tagore in the Netherlands, to come to Vishwabharati in Shantiniketan and conduct fieldwork there for his book, which had to do with traditional Indian music. That is the word that he used. But although majority of his collections really were folk songs. And one of the songs that he collected was not just not was folk in essence, but he tried to think in the earlier times when he was directly working with Rabindranath Tagore. He used to think of even Rabindra Sangeet as being a folk song, and we know that Rabindra Sangeet is almost like a borderland kind of idea, because on the one hand it has elements that are drawn from folk cultures. On the other hand, it has elements drawn from classical music. It somehow prevents definition. It is somehow an in-between space that I try and bring out. And one of the reasons for considering folk songs as some sort of a borderland genre is because folk songs really are something like a metaphor. Metaphors are these. What are they really? They are objects that help you, or ideas that help you translate. So when you cross a border and when you arrive at the other side of the border, there is this question of translation that has to happen. And that translation usually happens whenever people who speak different languages, like during the period of colonialism, come into a different country. Then you have to translate a lot of things. So folk songs are also these constructs where a lot of translation activities kind of take place. One of the songs that I personally really like, that Bake had actually collected, is called Kotobar Bhebe Chinu, which is a Rabindra Sangeet. How many times have I thought? And the recording that Bake had collected was sung by Indira Devi Chaudhurani. Tagore originally wrote the song in 1885. So this was a 19th century song. And the melody of the song, if you listen to it, Kotobar Bhebe Chinu, is linked to an English folk song, Drink to Me Only with Thine Eyes, which you can look it up. And whereas the Bengali lyrics kind of speak to the surrender of a beloved one, it's an example of how Tagore merged expressions of human and spiritual love, very much connected in folk songs, that connected to the idea of bhakti or devotion in Hindu Vaishnavism. And Bake eventually in 1961 published a comparative musical analysis of both songs, which is Kotobar Bhebe Chinu and Drink to Me Only with Thine Eyes, and which is an excellent way of thinking about how we really today can analyze folk songs over time. But there is another resource that also we can consider here, which belongs to the collections of the British Library, and that is its Endangered Archives program, which EAP, Endangered Archives Program, which you can look up, which has almost thousands of recordings in its collection in the archival sound recordings section, which has various types of examples of folk music across India. And one more resource which can help us initially think about how ethnomusicologists, particularly
Sir,
those
I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but you have 2 minutes to conclude so that we can have 15 minutes for a discussion / question around. So sorry.
Sure. So I was anyway on the mode of concluding to think about the Smithsonian Folkways recordings. Smithsonian is a museum. It is a collection of museums really that exist in the US, and the collection's name is FOLK, Folkways, WAYS, Folkways Recordings, Smithsonian Folkways Recordings, which over this period of 1950 to 1980 produced several discs really of what they considered to be folk music of India, and many of these songs included recordings that were specifically done for the Smithsonian by the All India radios. You can see again borderlands movements. All India Radio is producing songs for American institutions, and folk songs really that were limited to just one space in Bengal or Jharkhand or UP, traveled all the way to the US. And if you look at the track listings for those songs, you will have examples from West Bengal, Haryana, Tamil folk song, religious songs from Kerala, Rajasthani folk songs, of course, and spaces in South India. So I leave you to think, concluding this conversation is the multiple ways in which folk songs are constituted, the ways in which folk songs are collected, and folk songs as somehow crossing borders, not only metaphorically, but also in terms of of its sound, of its music, kind of traversing borders geographically, regionally, and of course geographically across the world as well, which really makes folk songs somewhat of a world music genre. So I end with that. Thank you so much.
Thank you for presentation. And I think you and the session is open for discussion. We can have a question, and who is going to ask the question? Kindly mention that the question goes and we can have the discussion. Please.
Sir, could you repeat your question, because I couldn't hear it properly?
I did not ask any question.
Oh, sorry. It's very.
I request participants to engage in the question or. So I think questions are queue. So please.
Bhumika, I think you had a question.
Yeah,
Yes.
please, Bhumika.
Yeah. Hi, sir. So I had more of insights also, like, and something that I would like to know from Mukesh, sir, because he spoke about Ramdev, and it's also like the people living there still practice that tradition and still pray to him, but at the same time, people who migrated and left that place, they sort of took that with them, but eventually they sort of because in cities there's more of that Vaishnavite or Shaivite tradition that people start following. They start worshipping the goddesses, Devis, Devtas. So in that kind of a setup, like what happens to praying to a god like Ramdev? Because within my family, I saw a sort of like it being diminished, or sort of like years ago we used to pray to him, but now it is not that much of a tradition. So I would like you to comment on that. Thank you.
Yeah, I think with folk tradition, I would use the word called persistence. They persist no matter what in a lot of ways. And sometimes the way they transform into something which is kind of unrelatable. So if you remember from the presentation, I said, like, Ramdev is also being considered or worshipped as the avatar of Krishna. So now if you have that, it will go into Vaishnavite tradition, right? I think Bhumika, your voice is not, you are on mute.
Yeah. So I get that, but then again, it is very distinct because every time I mention it to any of my friends, of course, they don't know Ramdev, or even in Phad paintings, when we have different gods that are represented on the Phad painting in our tradition. It's like a distinct localized god that we are bringing forward, and they don't look like the gods that we worship. They look very normal. Like Ramdev looks like a man who has mustache and beard, and he's a very normal man living his life. Even in the photo that we have in our house, there are snippets of his life in circles. But it looks like a normal life at some point, but with a grandeur, since he's like a horse, or he's dressed up in a like king-like attire. So I have many questions related to that. You can answer whichever you find.
Yeah, I'll try to sum it up. So in a that way, so a lot of way, I think it's important to see that from 1920s onwards, the transformation of Ramdev. So the main shrine in at Pokhran, it was actually a graveyard, a resting place, and it is a private property because there's a lot of legal battle between the Rajputs and the Meghalus Dalit about the who are the main basically the shrine holders. And so it is basically 1920s, end of our 1920s, the transformation of Ramdev from this very syncretic, popular saint figure, from there to a god. So the shrine become a temple, the saint become a god, and a lot of these tradition basically get transformed into very Puranic god kind of a very, the idea of cleanliness, like, this very, you could say the, it was a cleansing process, And this is very interesting because Ramdev was a very, very powerful anti-caste figure. And when I spoke to a lot of people, people say if there is any anti-caste movement which is going to happen in Rajasthan, its face would not be Ambedkar, its face would be Ramdev, because socially is very, very relevant even today. And I think Ramdev is spreading quite wide and far. Right now within India, there are shrines. In Pakistan, there is a very popular shrine, which is in fact one of the top 2 or 3 non-Islamic shrine in Pakistan, which is worshipped. It's 150-year-old. So I mean, I would say because it's a 500-year-old phenomena, the change always happens. For us, what we might have seen in our childhood 20, 30, 40 years back, or what we might read about Ramdev 100 years back, that's the original one, right? But the original was much before that as well. So these things keep changing. So I think that's important to remember. And I think what you say among the diaspora, one of the miracles that Ramdev performed was basically for the business communities, Baniya, what in the songs they called. So in a proper Orthodox Hindu religion, the crossing the sea is considered impure, right? But the business people would cross the sea to do business. So it's Ramdev who actually comes. That's why they worship him, right? Not the Puranic god, because for Ramdev, crossing sea was not a taboo, right? So there is a lot of these miracles has been instrumentalized in a way that different communities would find a way to worship Ramdev, and a lot of these ways were not considered accepted in the Orthodox Hindu religion. So these are the strategy that a lot of these folk tradition actually instrumentalize to bring build a larger social base, like political parties do is in nowadays. This is a social engineering of different order of in that point of time. Yeah, I think we can take
we have
later.
another 7 minutes, Megal. We have another 7 minutes. Right? We will wind up at 6:30.
Okay, we can.
Yes, okay.
Mrittika ma'am is raising her hand. We can ask her. Thank you so much.
Yeah, sure. Please.
Yeah, hi everyone. It was a very great discussion. I really enjoyed it. Continuing what Bhumika said, I'm audible, right? Yeah. So continuing what you said, so if we look at Uttarakhand and the entire caste system and the Jagar tradition, which is, the deities incarnate into the bodies of, the family members and your ancestors, or your local deity might incarnate on you. So that also has a very strong ethnomusic tradition and all of that. My MPhil dissertation was on the socio-linguistic aspect of it, not the ethnomusicology. But it is kind of related. But I kind of do think that if you go through the Jagar, the folklores, which are also the songs which are sung, you will always find similarities or parallels between the characters, between like the ancestors, the local deities, and the greater gods, like Ram, Krishna, Ganesh, and those kind of things. So which is very interesting, because then at one point of time it becomes very difficult to see where the original, which is, if you want to call it original, where the story actually comes from, because they are similar but they are very different stories. So, and the elements are the, you can't say that this story picked up this element or this supernatural miracle that happened from this story. So it can go both ways, perhaps. So in some ways, one point is that, and I think it is very unique to the region that traditionally what used to happen was in the Jagar event. So you didn't need like a priest, like a proper priest. The family does the event. But what has happened is over the time, and since I did my MPhil dissertation in 2015, so over that period of time till now, what I see is there is an increase of, creating, like turning those small temples or their places of worshipping into more like, temples, like elaborating the procedures and making the temples very similar to what is a typical temple right now, like a typical Hindu temple right now, which the Jagar players, who are usually they come from the lower caste, they say that they feel that the power of the deities is decreasing, because वो कहते हैं कि आडंबर बढ़ गया है. They say that the show off and all of that has increased, so which decreases the power of the deities. So उनको लगता है कि उनका tradition धीरे धीरे खत्म होता जा रहा है, Because they cannot connect with the deities. How will they connect their audiences to the deities? So this is a very, it's very interesting. So I just wanted to add that to the conversation. Thank you so much.
So can we
just
move
have
to
one sentence to make here?
Okay, sure,
That
sure.
sometimes we just need to see at the power relation in society when we are actually, because this is beyond religion and music or tradition. This is a lot about power. Yeah.
Okay. Can we move to Pramantha sir?
Yeah.
Yeah. I would request Pramantha sir to answer the question. I would.
I can read
Would
it
you?
out. Monami's question. Yeah. Monami's question is to Pramantha sir. As we are discussing about trans-border exchange of Indian folk songs, I would like to know your views on cultural appropriation relating to such exchanges. Whenever we are talking about an archive in the UK, aren't we somewhat subscribing to the idea that we need the white academic world to actually discover and bring forth a tradition originating in the East? So, sir, please, the floor is yours.
Yeah. Well, Monami, thank you for that question. It's a very serious concern that you raise, and it's a very important concern, really, one that cannot be looked at, overlooked quite easily. Of course, there are these politics, of course, surrounding these kinds of things, but the way sensitively I've been trying to think about it is really where we're living in a world where we are trying, in a sense, to also preserve songs, and sometimes there are these considerations we have about who has the funding to preserve folk songs, who has the ability or the financial means or resources to help protect folk songs. One of the things about the Endangered Archives project is that the collecting bit isn't actually done in the West. The collecting thing is the Endangered Archives project provides funding for Indian researchers and for Indian scholars to actually do the work of actually documenting, providing the funding to go out and do this research to document. And it only takes a portion of the collections and then puts it up on the website, which is a way, because some websites in the UK, of course, or in the US for that matter, are much better funded. They are able to stay online, and where you and I can actually listen to the materials that are actually there. So, of course, there is the more cultural appropriation question that in the past, the long histories of colonialism, the brutal, pasts of, essentially narratives of white people taking over cultures and appropriating them for their own benefit is, of course, there. We acknowledge that history, and it's important to do that. But it's also important that we work with current realities that we have with ourselves, where we think about the fact that, well, here are these song recordings that some people have come and done, and they are we have access to it now. One of the Endangered Archives project, and I'll kind of end there. One of the Endangered Archives project works was to provide funding for an archives in Delhi, which involved Rajasthani music, and sometimes. And this is the ARCE in Delhi. And sometimes a lot of not just Indian researchers, but also the folk communities themselves who have lost songs due to generations, that songs that are not sung anymore, could come to these archives and actually listen to songs that were recorded in their villages or have a copy of those songs. So sometimes these archives themselves become, spaces of dissemination of knowledge that doesn't exist anymore in our own communities, but exists in the form of sound in archives. And often funding for those projects come from the West. It's unfortunate, but it is a reality. But of course, there are many more collaborations that are also happening between Indian and Western institutions. So we are at an even playing field right now.
The last 1 minute.
Sir. Actually, we are, out of time. It's really unfortunate that we have to cut this conversation short, but we have to proceed with the schedule. I want to thank both Pramantha sir and Mukesh sir, and also Hanif sir for their very pertinent thoughts on such an interesting topic. I think everybody has taken a lot away from this session. I would just like to formally thank the chair as well, and also the volunteers who've been working tirelessly to ensure that the sessions proceed on time. We now have a final session of the day, which is one of our it's a highly anticipated session because it's a conversation with a folk artist, and I would like to hand over the baton to Mrittika, who will be in conversation with the artist. Before that, I just end the recording. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining in. We'll just be back in a minute.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for all the participants and recipients.
Thank you for your time and for the wonderful conversation.